Hello and welcome to the Amplifier Podcast, the show where the best in business discuss how you can grow your business best. I'm Wyatt McPherson, I produce this show, and on this episode, our host Don Cooper is joined by Todd Snelgrove for his first of 3 episodes with us to talk about value creation in all aspects of a successful business. Todd is a senior member of Experts in Value, driving value-focused selling and culture language to help businesses create and maintain high-value creation for their clients. Todd is also widely accepted as the leading subject matter expert when it comes to value. And if you think I've mentioned value a lot, then you would be correct, but it is an incredibly important aspect to any successful business to set yourself apart and make your clients happy. So this is definitely an episode that you don't want to miss, but don't forget that we did 2 more episodes with Todd that are out alongside this one, and do make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss any others in the future. But with all of that said, I truly do hope that you enjoy this episode of the Amplifier Podcast. Now please take it away, Don.
So welcome to the next episode of the Amplifier Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cooper. Today, I have a special guest for you, Mr. Todd Snelgrove. So welcome to the show, Todd. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thanks, Todd, for having me, and look forward to sharing some experiences and best practices and giving the people some takeaways of how to capture value so that both the buyer and seller can be more profitable.
Now, understanding value is a really niche and really important space. So, tell me how, your career that got you to here.
I'll try to keep it short, but hopefully there's some key takeaways from it. So, Donna, I think you know I'm Canadian. So I grew up outside Toronto area and had a chance to go work for a big engineering company called SKF in the mid-90s. Great company, made great products and services, but they were always the price leader, the higher price version in the marketplace. And back in the 90s, the technical sales representatives of SKF would talk to the technical people at the customer, the engineering people, and they would talk technology and terminology, et cetera. And the technical buyer would have all the authority, the power to make the decision. And purchasing was basically told what to do. Make it better, make my machines better. That's what mattered. And then we started to see this rise of the economic buyer. Finance, procurement, the evolution from purchasing to procurement to C-level discussion. And I'm saying, there's 3 or 4 or 5 other competitors that look the same and smell the same. Why am I paying you more? And I started working on how do we communicate our value better? How do I quantify that in dollars and cents so we can present that to customers? And that started a long journey. I moved to the States, did this for North America, then globally, on the sell side and pricing side and business model side, but also on the buying side, making sure that our company was making the best buying decisions on best value. So what is value? How do you quantify it? How do you articulate it? These types of things, because having great products and services that you can't put a number to leaves the buyer in a situation where they don't have much meat to justify where they're not buying the 3 bids and the lowest price that meets the minimum requirement. So our CEO
3 bids to buy is not a good idea.
No, not a good idea. Not a good idea. And the CEO said, "Hey, SKF being a big company, $10 billion. They said, I spend all this time and money investing in training and products development and all this stuff. But if I can't get our customers willing and able to pay for it, it's worthless. I need somebody to pull together all this value stuff." So kind of created my own job and went on a 25-year run doing with big companies. And now I help companies on the buying side and the selling side implement it.
That's awesome. You and I are, I think, similar in age, and I started, on the sales side, being a technical sales guy. I started off as a technician and then got into sales in the early 90s. And the 2 things that you said there about the rise of the economic buying influence, so true. And so many people in the industrial space, we still levitate towards doing all of this selling and conversations with the technical specification buying influences. And then we kind of get hit in the head by the finance people who didn't understand any of that value conversation, the technical reasons why we're better. And it's like, well, we just need you to be cheaper now. And, I find that, that's so true. The other thing that I think is really important, and I think is a significant change, is those same economic buying influences 25 years ago they and the engineers that we worked with needed us because we had all the information.
Mhm.
Today, they don't need us for the information, or at least they don't perceive to need us for the information, because, Google can tell them 500 ways to buy a valve.
Yep. No, it's I'm just smiling and laughing here because, yes, I mean, we might need to help them sift through the extreme amounts of knowledge and conflicting knowledge. But when I started, and not to get too finite in terminology or titles, but people were purchasing people, and it's specifically in the industrial space. A lot of the purchasing people were the retired people that were getting older on in age, knew the business. But again, it was, and I'm not trying to minimize, it was very important, but what am I buying? What's the part number? That one doesn't look like that one type stuff, but it was more of an administrative function. And I don't have the exact numbers with me right now, but in 1999, 1% of Fortune 500 companies had a chief procurement officer. It was procurement was part of finance, and it was a subcomponent.
Right.
And it was more really purchasing. So the activity of how do I buy, what form, what are my terms and conditions? You fast forward to today, I think 99% of every Fortune, whatever company, has a chief procurement officer, whether they report to the CEO or they report to a president somewhere, they're very high level. It's become much more strategic, because you have to think, if you have three companies, and I'm just going to use an example here, that make paper or oil or whatever, drill something, it's their ability to differentiate their offering and pulling that value from their suppliers. So, as I always say to procurement people, my technical people are a limited resource. There's three paper mills they're going to call on. You all make paper. Your cost of buying your raw inputs and energy is probably very similar. It's who can operate their machinery the most efficiently is probably going to have the biggest impact on their profitability. The best way to do that is to get those salespeople that are smart to want to bring their best ideas first to you. That's the competitive advantage. And they're not going to keep coming there if it's three bids and a buy. They're boss. I mean, you're a boss, Don. Do you want your salespeople spending all their time doing free consulting, bringing all these ideas to companies that don't reward them with the order? Eventually, it's no, go where you're rewarded with some business people.
Yeah, I mean, I in my industrial business, I instruct my entire team that when we get what I call a blind RFQ, I evaluate it first on, is this an existing client or is this a new client? If it's a new client, we have one question. Will your team, and I list the team of stakeholders we want to meet with, will they meet with us or not? If they say no, we say no, thank you.
Well, it's good to hear. It's good to hear I have a process in place there, because, again, especially in today's world, everyone's chasing every order. But I mean, I think we all know in sales, sometimes you're just used as the third bid. I can't afford.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't afford to invest the time and resources to do a proper.
Well, even if I don't know that I'm just a confirming third bid because they've already got an incumbent. At the very least, if one of my salespeople brings me a blind RFQ, as a seasoned business guy myself, I'm going to justifiably assume some other smart salesperson has been in front of this for 6 months and positioned themselves in a way that they've written themselves into the RFQ, because that's what I used to do. Right.
And I saw some interesting research from Gartner, and I can't give you the exact date, but 83% of the buying decision does not involve face-to-face with any supplier. So you get 17% of the time to try to get them to rethink. By the time,
and it's getting worse and worse and worse, because a few years ago, Gartner's research said that the buying decision is 70% made before they even engage with the suppliers.
Right.
And it's going, and so there's two things that are happening, right? I think one is that they're getting less and less involved because they, I call it the curse of knowledge, right? They think that they can figure out how to buy their solution because, the masterminds at Google can give them what they need. And, that just, that doesn't give you any insight into value. It just gives you information about product. And that's not the same thing. And, the other thing that has, I think, changed is the number of stakeholders with the client's buying organization who are involved in making the decision is going up and up and up and up and up. And salespeople and lots of organizations get comfortable talking to who they're comfortable with, and they miss 80% of the people who are involved in the decision making.
And I think
so. What do you have to say about the whole idea of consensus?
Yeah, well, I think there's
and committees.
There's three things that I'm thinking of there. Number one, there's a committee. It depends whose research you look at, but the general numbers are 7 people involved in there. So you know, the technical user, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're not the lowest priced person and your person's in there and they're saying, hey, you know, I want to choose this one, you need to give them ammunition. I like the person. He's responsive. He's been a good friend of mine. He always answers the call. Those aren't going to, you know, I'm 6 other people. That's not value to me. Saying, here's the business case that we put together, saying that if we work with this chosen supplier, these are the impacts. Give them the ammunition to justify not buying the lowest price. I'm going to steal a quote here from a lady who's the head of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. I did an event in the UK years ago, and she said, you know, if you can't quantify your value to salespeople in the room, don't expect me to do it for you. I'm responsible for buying a zillion things. I can't be an expert on every little thing. Yeah. So, you know, all I see is they look the same, they smell the same. If you can't do the work, don't expect me to do it to justify paying you more. And I just laugh because a lot of people will say, well, we can't quantify our value. We couldn't possibly put a number to it. Well, if you can't, guess what? Procurement can't either. And you can't. This is what I do for 25 years. Back to the point about the RFQ engagement. The only key takeaways that I have as best practices and the like is that if that's your first time, you better find a way to respond and shake them up because they've already decided they want to buy this, 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 and this. So, you know, I would say to people, fine, I'm going to charge you to bid. If you want me to come in and do this, and I'll waive the fee if you choose me. But I'm not going to come in and do free consulting and saying, you asked for this. This is what you asked for, but don't you want this outcome? Yes. Well, that outcome will be better doing this. That's called free consulting. So say, okay, fine. I'm going to bid, but either I'm going to charge you to bid, and then I'll waive it if you choose me, or I'll charge you to bid and only charge you half of the value that I create. Here's 5 ideas that'll save you $100,000 of energy. Take it and choose whoever you want to do the job, but I'm going to get paid for that. There's got to be some skin in the game because I will ask anybody to do something free with me. And I have a friend who's in the construction remodeling business, and he does extremely well because he does awesome work. But I always ask him, I said, and this is a business to consumer situation, but how do you not get cherry picked? You know, come to my house, tell me everything I need to think of if I want to do a bathroom remodel, as an example. Well, you need to consider this, and if you thought of that, and change this, and if you want to, because once you tell me everything, I've extracted that knowledge. I could probably go to Home Depot and do it myself or hire people for whatever it is per hour to do it. Your value is that knowledge and experience. And he goes, no, I have to be cognizant that I'm giving away conceptual ideas, very high level. So people look and go, that guy knows what he's talking about, but I don't give him the blueprints. I don't say, and, you know, change this and change that, because you're right. After that, I am a commodity because you're going to take that and tell every other supplier. And when I want it done this way. So
we've had, you know, with one of our engineering services, in our industrial business, we perform what's called on-stream leak repairs.
Okay.
You know, we're literally measuring up a piping flange, and it's leaking, and we're designing a custom fit metal box to go over top of it.
Gotcha.
So that we can seal that leak while the plant is running. So we've had 2 clients this past year, and who we would submit our proposal with our engineering drawings, and then we'd get a phone call a week later from some machine shop that says, hey, we've got your drawings. XYZ company has asked us to build it, but we have some questions. I'm like, because and I was like, are you for, I mean, it says right on the drawing everywhere, intellectual property and such and such and such. And, these 2 different companies just handed out our drawings and tried to get a local machine shop to do it as cheap as possible. And then they wanted our feedback on how to build it because we excluded certain details.
Well, that's good. And the joke I always make, especially in the industrial space, is that once you start to realize your value is your knowledge,
Mhm.
more than just I have a bearing. Well, he has a bearing. Well, mine's better than probably not. It was the knowledge around what should you do and how. I won't get into all that, but it's the knowledge. Anybody that's had the pleasure of dealing with a lawyer, and I could say this now, my dad was a lawyer in his past, but I can say, I mean, you might get the 30-minute free discussion so they can say, here's your conceptually what I know and what I think, but they don't give you the game plan, because if they did,
No.
I would go online and do it myself. And
Sure.
that's just one thing I say, put that in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Your knowledge engineering, you might be selling a product in that example, but the knowledge around it is really what it is, or the
Yeah.
differentiator.
Now, you wrote the book for buyers and sellers on value first, then price. And and tell me about how you put that book together, because there's an awful lot of contributions.
Well, it's an interesting. So a professor from a university approached me and said, we should write a book on best practices in selling. He met me at Strategic Account Management Association, SAMA, and I was doing a keynote on the need to sell value and how to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And we started saying, there's a lot of books on best practices in selling. Some of them are better than others. We can just leave it at that. But, one, I'd like to see practitioner, not just theory. Give me some true examples. So what is Parker Hannifin doing? What is DHL, the big European shipping company? I mean, you're shipping boxes. There's 3 people. How do you charge more? Maersk, I think, is also in one of the chapters, the shipping company. But then I remember it was going to be sales only. And over the years, I've been very lucky to do a lot of work with procurement. And honestly, it was by accident. But procurement people saw me. I think it started at London Business School, and they said, we talk about buying value all the time. We don't know. We know theoretically how. Can you come talk to us? So I got to meet a bunch of different procurement people, some professors, so University of Tennessee and IMD and some procurement schools, Center for Advanced Procurement Studies, saying, wow, how do we do this? And then I said, you know what? I'd love to hear from you. What do salespeople do that helps them not get paid for value? So there's some great chapters. A Scottish gentleman named Rob McGuire. He used to be a customer of mine. Now we're best friends. He used to be a chief procurement officer at Stanley Black & Decker, then a company called Reckitt Benckiser, which is a Procter & Gamble. But I mean, he goes, you sales guys don't understand how I buy. You don't understand how I think. And value quantification being so important to it. So I think he wrote a great chapter in there. One key takeaway that probably goes against the way most people sell is I usually, when I'm engaging a client, I say, show me your key account presentation. You get a big opportunity to go into this company, show me what you would show, either at that review meeting or that first time you're making the introduction. And I'm going to say they all are some variation of, here's who I am, my company, here's my history, here's where my offices are, here's how big I am, here's some accreditation, here's who I am, and then here's 7 things that I could do for you. They lead to what the value would be.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, Todd, how many times have you guys been sitting in a room with a C-level person and they've looked at their BlackBerry? So it gives you an idea of how long ago we're talking. And they got up and they left. And I said, oh, that drives me nuts. You prepare for this big meeting, you finally get the right person in the room. He goes, I decided after 5 minutes that this is not important enough for my time, that I can be somewhere else. And what you need to do is start with, I think I can deliver, I'm going to make up numbers, $1 million of profit improvement to you by energy savings, optimize, whatever that is. Now I want to show you how we could do that and where we could do that. You've got to get in front of me and get me interested.
Yeah.
Because
you got to get them excited right from the get-go with what value they're going to get out of that meeting.
Yes.
And they don't care about how old you are and about how big your building is and how many people they don't care about any of that. I mean, if they want to know that stuff, they'll ask at the end, oh, by the way, like, what's your capacity? Right? All of it gets wrapped up in the customer saying, what's your capacity? Right? And that becomes a qualification statement sometime later. But if you don't capture their attention in speaking their language, you're done.
Yeah, and his point was, you wouldn't have the seat at the table if I didn't know who you were. I mean, you wouldn't have I wouldn't have been in this meeting, if I didn't have some idea of who you were, or somebody said, hey, we vetted them. They're, it's not just some guy in his garage that says he can do this. I mean, so by then I've already got something. And like you said, now you've got me interested. Now I'm going to challenge you. Where have you done that before? How would you do that? What about this? Do you have the capacity? I mean, these are all closing questions, but you starting with how I'm going to do it just minimizes it right away. So I think he tells some great stories in there, and there's a bunch of professors in there, and saying, suppliers talk about value all the time. We want to buy value, and here's how you need to get that to me. What in the selling process you have to do it? How do you need to do it? How do you need to convince me to do it? So I think there's some great takeaways there, and I enjoy spending time with procurement people because I hate people thinking of sales and buying as these people of competing forces. Real quickly, I used to use a term that we would capture value as sales. So my title of my presentation is always, you start with creating value. Value is not something that your engineers think is a value sitting in head office, but the customer values. You need to calculate that value. You need to put dollars and cents to it. You need to communicate that value so that people nod and go, that makes sense, I understand it. You're early in the buying process, so people are rethinking, I should be buying on this, not just landed cost, whatever that is. And then I would say capture, because that would be 4 C's, and create, capture, calculate. And it was a professor who was very well known in the value space named Jim Anderson, Kellogg, and he says the problem with the term capture, Todd, is you're reinforcing the mindset that it's a zero-sum game, that value is created and you're capturing. Capturing says you're taking something away from something. He goes, all the research you talk about and that we've done together shows that both sides can be more profitable. So originally I thought he was being semantics, academic. He goes, no, both sides profit from value. And real quickly, just a few quick statistics here. Industrial companies that buy on best value. So an association called MAPI, Manufacturers Alliance of Productivity and Innovation, did a survey for me before I did a keynote at a procurement conference for them. So this is the big industrial companies. I'm just going to throw out some names like a Caterpillar or a John Deere type of big company type thing. And they said, do you have a structured methodology to buy best value? Which, and they gave examples of what do you measure? Do you measure, installation cost? Do you measure operating cost? Do you measure energy? Do you measure all these things? It turns out companies that buy based on best value are 36% more profitable than companies that don't. That every time they buy something, they try to figure out what value is. It's an ad hoc thing. It's 3 bids and a buy. A bunch of studies on the sales side, and again, that's the key number one I think is of interest. Companies that take the value approach, not the volume, the value approach, and are good at it. Okay, and this was Deloitte doing some work. We're 36% more profitable. So the buyer can be 35 and a half, and the seller can be 36, not at taking it from the other person, but by reducing cost or creating profit. It's a win-win for everybody. Won numerous awards from my customers saying, I didn't mind paying you more because you delivered more value than that. And my favorite was my CEO at the annual shareholder meeting, which I got to go to a lot. He says, we increased price by this, but we created more value that was 3 times as much. The more you buy from me at a higher price, the more value you get. The world's better off by getting rid of waste. So it's trying to sit beside the buyer and seller.
Getting rid of waste. I love that because I think that's where all the value is created, in the industrial space. But let me be clear. Are you saying that price and cost and value are not the same thing?
The only thing the 3 of them have in common, believe it or not, is they're all 5 letters. They're completely different concepts, but I can tell you a million stories of where people have transposed it. Price is what you pay for something, $10.
Yep.
Okay. Cost basically would be $10 plus the shipping cost, plus the receiving cost, plus the cost of researching it, plus any return cost, But value, I mean, there's also other costs. How much energy does it use? Does it use more ink, more water? These types of things. And then value, because again, people look at total cost of ownership or only looking at the cost side. But what if I could help you increase your revenue? What if I could speed up your machine? What if I could increase the value of what you sell? So you can sell it at a higher price to your customer. What if I could get you to the market faster? In some industries, so the high technology, high tech world, time to market is everything. If you've got a faster phone or better phone, every week you're in the market before your competitor gets there is worth, and you can quantify this. There's seasonality to it. I mean, give you a true example that just happened this year with COVID. Peloton got hammered at one of their earnings because their logistics supply chain couldn't move stuff fast enough. Time to market was everything, shipping, these types of things. So time to market.
I was talking to a CEO today, and there was two different CEOs I was meeting with today. I was in this entrepreneurial CEO group the last day and a half, and one of them had ordered a Peloton, and it was like 5 months ago, and they finally got it.
Yep.
For his wife. 5 months.
Christmas. Yeah, for Christmas.
yeah, that's about right. And the other gentleman, he had bought a high-end mountain bike, and he ordered it in October, and he's getting it next week.
And you wonder
how much value is lost.
Yep. And I can give you a specific example there. So one, Peloton just announced they're investing in a big manufacturing facility in Ohio. Supply. So I was doing a project, and I won't get into specific names, but it was a company that was involved in small, low price plastic things. Think little, shaving bottle-y type things, right? Sure. And they're selling to a Procter and Gamble type of a company, and they're competing against supply out of Asia. Okay, and Asia is lower price per piece than and their argument was, but we're local. Okay, you want me to pay you, I'm going to make up numbers, but I think it was 25% more because you're local. And the customer couldn't get their mind around it. It's just too much. And we did a project, and we were able to quantify that the customer was actually paying 37.5% more than what they thought they were paying. It was actually 12% cheaper to buy something locally that was 25% more expensive. Because one, the way the contracts are written, you've got the currency fluctuation between the US dollar and the yuan. And I said, okay, we know where the yuan normally trades. We know where it is now because of numerous political whatever reasons, but you're opening yourself up to this much risk. Right? I mean, so there's risk there. Now you have to put probability against risk, but you're basically funding something there. Two, the cost to ship stuff from Asia to the US right now is going back towards historical highs for two reasons, which I didn't know. Again, it's amazing what you can learn by doing some Google research, but all the ships are coming full, leaving Asia to North America. North America used to send a lot of our recycling material back to Asia to be disposed of. Asia said, we don't want it anymore. So ships are coming here full, going back empty. Well, guess what the shipping company say? Well, wait a minute. Okay, then you're paying for it both ways, guys, whether it comes back empty. So double the price coming in. Then inventory. These people were, there's a cost of inventory. I'm going to make up numbers, but it's like 6 weeks to get something out of China factory to the port to get it on the boat. Then it gets stuck sitting in Long Beach, California, because they can't dock to get it off. So Mr. Customer was keeping, say, 3 to 4 months of inventory, where if you were down the street from me, I would keep 2 weeks of inventory. So you can quantify. Either way, we started walking through all this, and we presented it back to the customer, and the customer said, the research is sound. We never knew it was that. We knew it was there. We didn't know what it was. But wow. I mean, so I think there's some takeaways there. One, it's our job to start with some reasonable assumptions and go to the customer. And I hate to use the term educating, informing, challenging, because they said they knew something, but they hadn't done the work around it. And they said, I could be high there or low there or change that. But they were like, wow, you're right. You're actually cheaper when you look at the total cost. And again, lost revenue, because in that market, I mean, if you think it's your shelf stocked, you're in trouble. There's a revenue loss.
If I understand what you're saying for our listeners, then one, the selling company needs to do the work to calculate the value. Now, they might need to make some assumptions and then get buy-in on those assumptions from the selling organization. They also are going to need to know what the competing alternatives are, and to give themselves a comparison. You know, if it's me, company A and company B, you better understand what those differences are in value, and try to quantify it.
Yes. But even if you don't know, I mean, first of all, there is always an alternative. And I love my engineering friends. I would ask them, what's the alternative? There is no alternative. There always is. Doing nothing is an alternative. Well,
Absolutely.
That's bad. I know it's bad, but it's an alternative. You could run
But
your
it's a reality. I always tell my team that there are 4 kinds of competition that you face, right? There's the competitor that you think you know, which is buy from somebody else. But it's use internal resources to do it themselves. It's to do nothing, or it's to use the money for something completely different.
Yes. There you go. So those are
all of those are competing, is the competitive environment that you got to try to uncover. It isn't just buy from company A, buy from company B, because it might be not buy at all.
Yes. And let's come back to that, because this ability and willingness to pay is an important, getting them to choose you versus doing nothing. And I can't give you the source right now, but it was something to the effect that the company or the supplier that brings the business case first to the customer is 70-something% more likely to get the order, even if other people show up with a business case. If I've been working with you, so I might not need to know, I know nothing, or I know existing scenario, I know where I could be. And then maybe I do know my competitor, that they're not as quick, or they're not as this, or they don't have these skills or tools or whatever it is. But just by being first, I put the onus on them to do it. And now they're on the defensive. You set
there's actually a lot of science in that. And there's a book by Dr. Robert Cialdini called Influence, and he's got six laws of influence. He now just came out with a revision. There's a 7th law of influence. But one of those laws of influence is the human propensity to be consistent. And so when you work, I mean, you've heard this in sales, micro commitments, right? But once you get engaged with your client, and equally when they get engaged with you, you're both likely to act consistently from how you've acted in the past. So it's really important that you get in front with business cases early. And that's why I always tell my team that, RFQs, if you haven't been involved in that RFQ for months before it came out, is an exercise in 200 or 300 person hours in preparing a document that no one's going to open.
And the only way to get them to open it is to walk in and say, are we talking about $100,000 job and the price to do that, or the $1 million improvement I can make? Do you want to talk?
Yeah.
That's the only way to get me to restart the whole buying process. Again, is to say, wait, I missed something, and to have the confidence and have some reasonable assumptions around it.
And there you have it. Thank you everybody so much for listening to this episode of the Amplifier Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with or learn more about Don or Todd and what they both do, then you can do so anytime through their links in the episode description. Make sure you leave the show a 5-star rating. It truly does help us out a lot. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss any future episodes. But with all that said, I thank you so much for listening again, and we can't wait to see you next time on the Amplifier Podcast.